everyone. Welcome to the ballpark. Yes, I said that intentionally because we're going to be talking a little bit about how baseball ties to workforce management today. Vince Jackson here. Again, welcome to the podcast. We have a couple guests here today. We have Corey Cutler joining us from UKG, Eric Hoffman from Improv, and of course, the person who calls me the sidekicks, Dr. Sarah Inman, is with us as well today. Sarah, why don't you get us going here? I know you had a couple questions.
Oh, I absolutely do. Thank you for the intro, and thank you for our friends Corey and Eric for being here. I've been so excited about this episode. We are all huge baseball fans here, and we started talking about this actually a few months ago, just the different ways that baseball takes lessons from workforce management or vice versa, depending on how you're looking at it. And Vince and I thought, you know what, that would be a really fun podcast episode. So as we were thinking about who our friends and colleagues in the industry were who felt just as strongly, if not more so, about workforce management as they do about baseball, we reached out to Corey and Eric, and they were so kind to join us. And I think we've got a really cool session lined up for y'all today. So before we jump into the questions, I'm actually going to play your MC for the day, mainly because, spoiler alert, we've got two fans of the same team on this podcast today. So I had a feeling most of our anecdotes would be pretty similar. I'm going to tell you all, lifelong Red Sox fan here. Now, it depends on the day. Sometimes I'm proud, sometimes not so much. Currently, and probably for the next 3 years, I will be feeling not so proud as I continue to work through the emotions of the Devers trade, as I'm still not over the Mookie trade, but we'll talk about that later. So with that in mind, I would love to turn it over to my nearest and dearest friend in the workforce management space, Mr. Corey Cutler, the prestigious Director of Global Engagement Services at UKG. Corey, tell us about your favorite baseball team and why you're excited to be here on the podcast today.
Isn't it funny that I'm next? We'll just start in the B's, and I guess we'll skip Atlanta and we'll go right to the B's. We'll skip the A's. Again, Corey Cutler from UKG. I work in Global Engagement Services, where we help position the services team for success from a human capital management and a workforce management perspective. I've been in the workforce management business now for 25 years. I'm dating myself. Super excited to be able to have this conversation. Also a lifelong baseball fan. From my early days watching my dad cheer on the hated Yankees to my coming to my senses days, choosing the Red Sox to cheer for just so I could cheer against my father. So super excited to be here to talk about some of the nuances. I have a few other favorite time period teams that I can talk about. So super excited to get some jabs in for some really great baseball from the past, and how baseball ties perfectly, absolutely perfectly, into workforce management.
And we are so glad you're here. And I mean, just in case nobody picked up on those nuances, before we jump to Eric and let him introduce himself, Vince, you want to go ahead and admit publicly to the listeners here who your baseball team is and why you're excited about this episode?
Yeah, Savannah Bananas. Absolutely.
No. Go Bananas. That is great answer.
They're everyone's favorite team.
Yeah, seriously, I've been a Braves fan for as long as I can humanly remember. Always have been, right? I mean, back in the Bob Horner, Dale Murphy days, right? Dale Murphy was my idol. I used to try to stand like him, swing like him, even when I was playing cut ball before baseball. Much like Corey, I've been loving this forever. And how can you go wrong with America's team, right? I mean, it's the Braves, so you gotta love them.
Eric, you're up, my friend. You tell us favorite team and why you're excited about this podcast episode today.
Well, when I first heard that you were working on this, I would have probably barged my way in through the front door, side door, and back door to be on it, because I love baseball. It's the sport that I've always played and I've always been involved with. But there is such a huge correlation between workforce management and Major League Baseball. And I'm glad we're going to talk about that, because there's so many connections, and even more so with the Cleveland Pro Baseball team. And I call it that because, as probably everybody knows, the name has changed recently to the Guardians. That team in and of itself exemplifies workforce management to its core. And I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Well, I will look for any opportunity to praise Terry Francona. So I have a feeling we'll go ahead and have some conversations about that while we're at it. But as I mentioned, I am going to play the role of MC more than anything today. So I've worked hard to develop some questions for you all that I would love to just kind of dive into, because as we've talked about, right, it was one of those things that don't even know how it came to us necessarily, but, you know, kind of that thunderbolt moment of, oh, wow, when you think about the game of baseball, and really not just that, the business of baseball on the back end, the alignment with workforce management makes so much sense. All of us are professionals who have spent years and years in this space, have worked for and directly with UKG. We live and breathe workforce management very much in the way that in our off time we live and breathe baseball. So what better way to spend an hour or so and have this conversation and really tie some of these things together. Right out of the gate, anybody jump in really who has a thought. What is one workforce management lesson that you think your favorite team, or maybe just a team in general that you admire or have seen along the way, has really nailed that you think more businesses or frankly baseball teams should steal?
Well, I'll start. I'll jump in because, again, I think although there's other teams certainly that espouse this approach, I think the Cleveland Pro Baseball team, the Guardians, does this probably better than anyone. And I think it's acknowledged for the most part. And it's because they have to. They develop your team from the very beginning, from hiring, drafting, trading, and support them wherever they go and whatever they do. And just develop the farm team, develop your team. This is going to be a recurring theme for me. I'm going to keep coming back to it, and you're going to go at the end, you're going to go, oh my gosh, not again. But it's true, is if you have a solid team and you nurture that team, I'm going to pull out the Ramirez example, which is he didn't leave for more money. He stayed as a free agent in Cleveland because of the fact that he was brought up, drafted, and developed by the organization.
Yeah, they're a fantastic example. And I don't know if the Braves are that good at this anymore, but if I go back to when I really spent a lot of time watching their games and even going to the games, was back when they had the misfit team in the early 90s and started winning, getting to the playoffs and winning. They used kind of a combination of, right, of having those senior resources, but having one heck of a farm organization where they were developing people in. You had the Smoltzy sitting there that was just awesome, but you brought in the Glavine of nowhere. You brought in Andrew Jones, you brought in Chipper eventually. You brought these kids up out of the farm league, but you had those senior people there that were just mentoring and watching them, and they were always looking at that. I mean, just like Eric laid out, right? They had that mix of people that could help and develop and coach. I mean, heck, you had Pendleton, right, who played, which I felt like he needed a wheelchair sometimes to get around the bases, but he loved it so much and was so much dedicated. He turned around and became their hitting coach, right? I mean, he just had such an investment into the team with these senior people of experience that could coach and mentor. And I think that's critical as well.
You mentioned Chipper, right? So you see these people who grew up within the team, not only spent their entire career there, but served as these huge mentors and idols for the younger players who are coming up behind them. Cannot escape a conversation like this without talking about my personal favorite baseball player of all time, Jason Varitek, the captain on the Red Sox. This is somebody who spent all of his career with the Sox and now still today pivoted in his post-retirement life. Frankly, fingers crossed, he's going to be manager soon. I keep counting the days until Corey frantically texts me and lets me know the news is spread that Cora is out and Tech is in. But when you see these people who are so invested in their team, right, they are paying it forward. They see the opportunity. They have acknowledged kind of the privilege that they had to spend their entire career with one ball club, and then want to make sure that, again, even in this post-retirement life, that they're paying it back and they're training up the next generation. And I just think it's really cool that you see that. It's not an everyday type situation, but gosh, that loyalty is so deeply embedded in some of these players. And I think there is a lesson there. And when you have your people and you invest in them and you take good care of them, they're going to turn around and take good care of you for the long haul.
I think we've hit on right on the first key point of workforce management, and that's that leadership matters. Great leadership matters. If I think of the 69 Mets, in the first 7 years of this franchise's existence, they never finished higher than 9th place in a 10-team league. They were the laughing stock of baseball. Along comes Gil Hodges, possibly one of the greatest managers of all time, and says, we're not here to be lovable losers anymore, and turns this team around in a season to win 100 games, to beat the Atlanta Braves in the NLCS, and to go on and beat the Orioles in the World Series. There's a reason they're called the Miracle Mets, but the reason they got to where they did is Gil Hodges and his leadership style, the way he used his team in the situations that he needed to use them, and the way he brought these players up. If you go and look at the roster from that team, you'll see a lot of future Hall of Famers on that team, a lot of future Hall of Famers, not from the Mets organization, but this is where they got their start, and they got their start under a fantastic leader. Leadership matters in workforce management. 100% it matters.
It absolutely does. And as we're talking about the farm system and leadership and kind of the role that plays, it takes me to, can't escape the conversation of the homegrown talent versus paying for talent, right? At the end of the day, no commentary on the Red Sox role and all of that. But when you're talking about that mix, and Eric, you really kicked us off talking about how with Cleveland, that farm system has really been just critical to them. From a workforce management perspective and a baseball perspective, how do you balance the need for that high dollar, top tier Otani of the workforce management world versus having these folks who are just young and hungry and eager to prove themselves? Where do you find that mix?
Well, this is controversial for Cleveland baseball fans, as it probably is in the WFM world. However, in both cases, you should work exceedingly hard to find a way, by whatever means available, to retain your top talent. I mean, that's a force multiplier when you can have just some of the top talent in your industry. In some cases, you cannot, and that's okay. If you part, let me just say this: do so with the best regard and support for them. You're both doing what's right for your respective families, for your respective organizations. It isn't always about money. Jose Ramirez stayed in Cleveland for significantly less dollars than if he had left. The reasons being, in part, we discussed already in the previous question. Cleveland drafted him, developed him, and built the team around him. Sometimes, heartbreaking as it is, money is the difference maker, as it was with Jim Thome. I don't know if anybody remembers Jim Thome leaving Cleveland to go to Philly. It was about money. In fact, the union put a huge amount of pressure on him to not take lower money to stay in Cleveland, because it would set an expectation or a precedent. That being said, there's still a statue of him outside a gate at the Jake. And yes, I still call it the Jake.
So what I'm hearing from that, Eric, is I should not continue to hold the animosity I do towards Johnny Damon for going to the Yankees, is what I'm hearing you say, and I reject it, frankly.
I'm with you, Sarah. You should never reject it when it considers anyone going to the Yankees. I don't care who it is. Okay.
Mic drop. That's all. The episode's over. That's all we needed, folks.
So that's the one thing I think we probably all can agree upon. Yankees, most hated team in MLB. Probably most loved too by the other half, but I mean, everybody dislikes them. But look, you got to have that balance, right? I agree with 100% with Eric. You got to find what that balance is. There's loyalty can carry you a long ways, but at the end of the day, people have to look at what their current value is worth, and can you afford them, right? And sometimes people outgrow your business. Sometimes your business outgrows people. So it works both ways, and you gotta stay on top of that. Maintain them as long as you can, and you're gonna have some people that are willing to stick around for less, and you're willing to stick around and take on the more heat. We have people on our team that do that, right? That could go make more money, go do whatever differently, but they're loyal and they enjoy what they're doing. Sometimes it comes back to and I don't know if there's a question maybe we're going to get to a little later. It comes back a little bit to the culture you've developed within the dugout as well. I mean, to make it really simple, right? If you have a culture running that is not good, people are going to jump ship. Your team's not going to perform. Things are going to fall apart. They don't communicate on the field. They don't communicate off the field. And the same goes for your organization and how you deal with workforce management and the culture that supports it too.
So Cutler, I want to kind of pivot to you with a little bit of specificity with this question and some background. Corey and I go way back, even pre my official UKG days, but he and I both were former healthcare strategists where we knew the solutions so well at UKG that they sent us in to deal with the biggest and gnarliest problems and issues that needed solutions for the customers. So balancing that when we're looking at the conversation of build or buy, right? When both of us come from a place where you need people who can go in and answer the questions that need 10, 15 years of experience in the dugout, in the bullpen, in the clubhouse, versus somebody who, again, is young and eager and hungry and wants to come up and wants to learn, but just hasn't had at bats. What's your approach there? Are you building or are you buying?
I think it's interesting, and I do think it has to be a hybrid approach, right? I think I would agree. I would agree with that. You build by investing in the people that you have, investing in training, investing in their career development, finding what they love and make that their passion every single day. That's the culture that Vince is talking about, right? That gets them to stay, that gets them continuing to do, again, what they love every single day. But when you have a special need, when you have a niche, you have somebody who you need someone to hit cleanup, right? And you just don't have that. That's when you go out and you look and you supplement your team. I think the interesting thing about culture is sometimes it's not a negative thing for somebody to leave. Sometimes they've just outgrown what you're putting around them and what you're building around them. And that's okay. I think, there can be some churn in an organization, and that still be good for your organization from a workforce management perspective. If that person doesn't fit, again, I help them find where they fit, help them move to the next level. I think, it's constantly balancing my team, the changes in my team, the cultural fit of my team, the performance of my team, the skill set of my entire team. And how do all of the players play into that? And again, I think that goes back to great management, right? Knowing your team, knowing who's available, and getting them the opportunity to perform at their highest level in the best situations and in the situations that they love and can thrive in.
That's a great point. And tying that back to the theme that I put out there about, treating your employees or people you work with like their family and may one day bounce back. I think it's important to say that just like in the MLB, where, and I'm saying this somewhat tongue in cheek, the Indians/Guardians will literally let all their good talent go because they can't afford them. But then on the backside of their career, they come back because they want to finish out and come back to a team that treated them right on the way up, just like Aaron Ain at Kronos and at UKG embraced the bounce back because of the fact that you may find out a couple of things. One, grass isn't always greener necessarily. Your circumstances may change as your career develops. And in both those cases, those employees, those people, those team members can actually be really helpful to your organization, whether there's a gap there where they're no longer with you or whether they continuously stay with you. So I think there's a lot of themes that are coming together here. And a good leader, to your point, Corey, a good leader will see that and will nurture that.
I love that you bring up Aaron Ain and the boomerang, because again, it's one of those situations where you treat people well, you give them opportunities. If they seek something elsewhere, keep it open to the point where they can come back with more knowledge, more experience. Let them get traded to another team for a year or two. Kind of watch the tape, see what's going on, and then let them come back with all that additional knowledge. But Vince, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was actually reading an article last week. I know I was on vacation, but still, I was, me, I don't stop. It was actually talking about that there's a massive rise in hiring boomerangs across all industries right now.
Mm-hmm.
That people are realizing that those people have a lot of value to bring back, right? It used to be once you were done, you leave, you're gone. Nobody want to touch, you didn't want to touch you again. But that trend is totally different than it used to be, which I find interesting, right? Because of our experience at UKG, wow, we had a high percentage of boomerangs. Rarely there was a door ever shut, once you left. But I think, consider that, remember that. not only in your hiring strategy, but even your recruiting strategy. Don't be afraid to go back after somebody that used to work for you. And, they know the culture and the team and the attitude and they know what they're getting into. And, if you like them and they were a good fit and they can do what you need, don't be afraid to go recruit those people back to your organization or to a different organization if you're there. There's a lot of value there.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, look at Alex Cora coming back to the Red Sox again. Have some thoughts on that. Astros could have kept him, but that's neither here nor there. But we've talked about boomerangs, and that takes me kind of to the issue of retention, because again, huge thing within the workforce management space, frankly, within Major League Baseball. When I think about retention, I think about two teams that in my mind just historically have not done it well. That would be the Mets, very roller coaster journey in terms of some really high profile player turnovers, and the Marlins. Listen, Marlins get good, they start winning, boom, you already know, don't get comfortable, don't buy any jerseys, because those guys are off as soon as the season's over, if they even make it that long. So what can we learn, coming back to the workforce management space, what can we learn about how the Mets have managed or mismanaged player retention? And from a workforce management perspective, what can we do from a retention standpoint so we avoid that knowledge loss, the morale issues, not just morale for the players, but again, morale for the fans, right? I'm sad every time I lose somebody. So as leaders, as workforce management experts, how can we do that well?
Well, I think it comes down to, and I'm a geek for baseball, right? And I know Vince, and it sounds like Sarah, you are too. You're like impressing the heck out of me right now. uh,
People don't know, but listen, if I could have done anything, I would have been a Major League Baseball player, but alas, we've not come that far as a society, so maybe one day.
and Corey, you clearly, you know your stuff. So what I would say is that you have to, and I know the Guardians do this. I'm sure every baseball team does this, and it kind of ties in with the whole stats era, the post Moneyball thing, where you have to understand the player, what their skills are, help them understand what their skills are, and then lean into that. And if you can get that correlation, and by the way, this applies to WFM. If you've got somebody that's incredibly good at one thing, maybe scheduling, then why wouldn't you lean into that, and help them understand that's what their affinity is for, and hopefully everybody gets aligned. Now, if you don't align, then you have to work through it. But the simple fact is, you can really truly develop people and retain them if you develop that alignment, and if you have that communication capability with the employee. Try to find something that works for them, even though it isn't necessarily in your quarterly plan or your annual plan. Maybe they can help the organization in a different way. If you know how to bunt and you're fast, there's a role for you. Be a role player on a team. Look at this speedster. I'm going to show my ignorance here. I know his skills. I don't know his name. We just played him actually not too long ago. This guy stole second, then stole third, then stole home. The guy's got ridiculous speed on the base paths. It's easy to find a place for somebody like that. But when you find a role player that you can pull off the bench in the right circumstances, that's also valuable.
Yeah, you've just talked about the key thing for retention, right? Purpose, growth, and trust. And if you can develop those three things in your workforce, retention isn't about pay. And that isn't, let's not bash the Guardians, right? They've adopted a lean process, maximizing efficiencies, getting the most out of the team members' strengths that they have. That's what they've done and listen, very successful organization. They have their focus. I think the players know what their role is, right? That's great management. That's great management within that organization. And it's not just the manager, it's from the top down. You know what you're getting into when you join the Cleveland, whatever your last names are. But I think that's the Mets right? The Mets problem in a lot of years past, right, is the focus on pay. And then it gets to the point where it's not profitable for you anymore, and you have to dump contracts in order to remain fiscally sound as an organization in MLB. Nobody's going to compete with the Dodgers and the Yankees salary-wise, and the teams that try 9 times out of 10 fail. And it's just a fact of MLB, right? But that's the Mets problem. They pay too much and don't have a vision. They don't have a vision for what they're trying to do. When they get there, they're a great baseball team. Like last year with their vision, could be comparable to their miracle heydays or their days in the early 80s. We'll see if they can stay there. We'll see if they can, keep that spark and keep that purpose within their organization. But like most organizations, I think this is the big thing with workforce management, right? It's tough to change when you have a culture that just doesn't fit. You lose the talent too quickly. So I think the key here, right, is focus on the culture, focus on your employees, focus on getting them the at-bats that they deserve, the at-bats that they want. And then you can start to build an organization that's successful in the future.
So I think it's important to look at the flip side of what you two just talked about as well, unfortunately, right? Is the people who don't fit into the culture, that aren't developing. And I hate to say this, you got to manage, it's manage up or manage out, right? A little bit, right? It's get people who will fall into those characteristics that will develop, that are part of the culture, part of the win, or those people who aren't, that honestly, if you don't get them out in a timely manner, are going to have an influence on those who are, and will detract from it and drag you down. So I think you got to recognize that and recognize it quickly, and figure out if you can manage them, to be more productive and into the team or not. I mean, you get those resources. I mean, look, they can be an incredible performer at one team, but for some reason, when you pull them over to your team, right, they just don't. They just, we've all had those. I mean, I sit there and watch the Braves. You're like, oh man, we got who? Wow. Oh man, that didn't turn out so well. You're like, boy, buyer's remorse there. And I think that's also a risk a lot of when you go out and spend money on people, is sometimes it does not pay out. I think your return on investment on people you develop is much higher. And if you look at it as holistically, but there's the right time to buy and the right time to develop, but recognize when they don't, do it quickly. It's in their best interest and your best interest. Doesn't mean they're going to be a bad person or a bad employee. They're just not the right fit for your organization.
9 times out of 10, they know it. They
Mhm.
don't have the kind of, they don't have the level of experience that necessarily the managers might have in seeing it, and then helping. It's actually helping that employee in this case, or it's the player, to say, listen, this isn't right for these reasons. And then I've seen people that I've had to have that conversation with, they go and they prosper somewhere else. And I love that. I look at it, listen, we're on this earth for just a very short period of time. You got to help people. And I think if you can help someone thrive somewhere else, whether it's a baseball team or whether it's even a competitor in a lot of cases, I think that's okay.
I think those difficult conversations are hard to have from a management perspective a lot of times, and they aren't had. And they shouldn't be a difficult conversation, right? A lot of times, you may have to help somebody find another opportunity for them, but a lot of times people just need to know you're not pulling your weight, right? You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that can instill in them a turnaround that if we do like most of us do and avoid that conversation, right, they're going to continue to flounder. They're going to continue just to kind of waste away and harm your organization as a whole. I'm going to go back to that 1969 Miracle Mets team and Gil Hodges, right? There was a time during that season where he literally, in the middle of the ball game, walked out on the field and escorted Cleon Jones off the field for not hustling for a ball. He wasn't derogatory, didn't say anything negative to him, just replaced him in the middle of the game with another player for not hustling. And listen, Cleon Jones was the all-star of the New York Mets in 1969, possibly the best player on that team, and got called out during the middle of a game. That's what good management needs to do. You need to have those difficult conversations with people. And like Vince said, manage up or manage out. A lot of times, just the conversation alone will help that person, change and feel like they're a part of your team. Maybe that's what they're lacking.
Well, listen, as long as the Mets don't touch Pete Alonso, I'll be all right. So we've dogged on the Mets a lot in terms of their inability to retain their players, but I will stay quiet and I will withhold any judgment against the Mets until and unless they send Pete somewhere, in which case we're gonna have a problem. She says, as the girl who grew up watching Met spring training in my backyard, there's nothing like seeing somebody literally on the field on the minor league team make their way up. We talk about retention and the bad ways to do it, but there's also that piece of it too. To be able to see somebody who, for everything that we just talked about, they came in, they worked hard, they hustled, did what they were supposed to do, and you're able to watch them grow in their career. That's really validating for a leader, for a manager, to be able to go, yeah, I invested my time and energy in the right kid, in the right one. But changing topics a little bit, Eric, a while back you were talking about Moneyball, and I want to talk stats and data because, of course, workforce management, but also it's literally the backbone of baseball. So baseball teams in general are obsessed with stats. It's the A's in the Moneyball era that really were able to truly capitalize on it, I think. But when we think about workforce management and how we bring that intersection, what is the most efficient way, or how should we as leaders and as workforce management practitioners be leveraging stats, be leveraging the data in order to make smarter decisions for our organizations?
I find this incredibly interesting because I love data. Data is integral to baseball and WFM, but they're both struggling to find balance, in my opinion, between human and data-driven decision making. So ever since Billy Beane worked his Moneyball magic with the A's, the rest of the MLB went, some would say, too far to the stat side, to the extent that owners are taking the decision making out of the hands of the managers and relying on the data solely. I mean, I'm sure we've all heard of the anecdotes where the manager gets a call in the dugout and they say, do this, do that, whatever. Maybe it's because I'm decidedly old school, but I believe data is useful. However, it should be a guide. Let the managers decide. In a real world example is at a WFM company, I spent a little bit of time of my time at, used a behavioral assessment. It was crazy accurate. I mean, you'd walk off the plane when you went to training, when you were hired, and they'd already know everything about you. It was crazy. And we all know that this is true. However, it was used as a guide, not the final answer on managing, hiring that person or that employee. And I think you have to allow they've proven scientifically that it's going to be one heck of a long time before any kind of quantum computer or any kind of AI can approach the brain. It's a magnificent thing. And even with the advances that are occurring, I think the human decision making has to be a part of that as it relates to employees, as it relates to anything having to do with data. Use it as a guide, as a tool. And I think that emotion certainly applies in the WFM world, where you're managing people and trying to get the best out of them. It's a data thing, yeah, but it's also an emotional thing. It's also understanding the person.
I agree with all that, and I think the other thing too is figuring out the right data to actually manage against is critical. To me, I'm more focused on what data is actually actionable and can drive the outcome that you're trying to get to, right? Whether that's baseball, whether that's workforce management, right? I watch some of these baseball games, and these guys keep bringing up these statistics that are just out in left field. I'm like, who gives a rat's what about that? Because it doesn't actually drive the impact. You know what the number one stat that matters in baseball? How many wins and losses you have.
I was like,
At
is it
the
going to
end
be
of the
something
day.
really profound, like how much heart you give when you step up to the plate to play the game? Nope, it's how much do you win
It's
and lose?
how much do you win and lose? Now, there are a lot of other statistics that can drive statistically what your probability of winning and losing comes. And, you want to understand, I mean, as a pitcher in my career, I'd love to know, a lot of stats, right, of where I'm placing the ball, what hitters and types of hitters I'm stronger against and types of things like that. I'd love to know where the hitter is successful at hitting. Does he struggle with high and tight or low and outside? And that's where I'd go place it, right? I love those types of things that make me a better player, right? That allow me to perform better not necessarily driven off the results of what I do sometimes. So that's the other thing too, is giving people the information they need to go be better. And again, it goes back to being actionable. So to me, that's, part of critical is what can I do with this day to day? I hate it when I walk into organizations that have 50,000 reports and 20 data views and don't use but one. Like, why do you have all these others? Are they noise? And do you have what you actually need on the one you do use, right? I mean, what are you actually looking at? There's, it's an old term, but analysis paralysis, right? I mean, are you looking at so much information that you actually are achieving nothing? Where's the statistical guru? So he can add a lot to this. So.
I was going to say, when I think data, I'm going back to my in the trenches buddy in the workforce management space. Corey and I have spent our careers and cut our teeth in staffing huge complex hospitals where the numbers matter. Having those stats and knowing what we need to do from an acuity standpoint and which numbers are going to fluctuate from seasonal census here, that's the name of the game for those of us in this space. So Cutler would love your thoughts on that.
You can have all the data you want, and if you're relying solely on that data, you're set up to fail. I think that's what MLB has taught everybody with regards to workforce management. If you're using that data in an educated way to make the best possible decisions and develop your strategic long-term plan and short-term planning situations, then you're going to be successful, right? Nobody knows when the next COVID is going to hit. But if you use the data that you have from your organization, the past data that you have, you know how to put a plan in place moving forward. Nobody knows when RSV season is coming. Nobody knows when influenza is coming. For Pete's sakes, nobody knows when the corn crop is going to ripen. But when it does, you need pickers, right? You have to staff. And listen, you can have all the data you want, but at the end of the day, the situation drives. That's the greatest. Only in baseball can we get this right. We're arguing whether or not someone hits the ball 25% of the time in this situation or 28% of the time. We're not talking about a 100% assurity that we're going to send this guy up to hit in this situation. He gets on base 28% of the time. Think of that for a minute, right? So when they're flashing all of these stats on the screen and doing all of this within Major League Baseball, at the end of the day, it's the gut of that manager. It's what does this situation best look like for us as a team? What is the best outcome going to be from us? And if that's 28%, that's 28%. Don't get so inundated in all of your past reporting, all of that you lose focus on what you actually have in front of you, which is a team that can go out there and win if you have the plan in place for them to win. That's the key piece here. Use that data to develop your team.
I love that. And stats don't tell you if somebody's having a bad day. Stats don't tell you if somebody's struggling with a bit. I mean, yeah, if you go a long enough slump, it'll tell you. But I mean, the reality is it's still people at the end of the day. That was perfect, Corey. I mean, you've got to focus on it. The manager's got to have that ability to understand, leverage the stats. But at the end of the day, the gut and understanding your people and everything else is what really truly matters.
So I know we're coming close to time. I would literally sit and do this for another 15 hours with you guys. So we may need to figure out how we do a follow-up session here because I've got 800 more questions to ask and things to kind of dig into. So the beauty, but also downside of America's pastime, going back 100 years of data and stats to talk about. I was fortunate enough just last week to be in Boston at Fenway Park and seeing some of these changes that have happened in baseball. We've got the pitch clock. We've got these massive new bases that, look like pizza boxes. And we've got the mitt. As I was thinking about this episode, there's constant evolution, both in the game of baseball and in workforce management. We talked about just some of those recent changes to baseball, but how does an organization, when we tie it back to the WFM perspective, how Can organizations adapt in the way that MLB has had to when there's changes in compliance, in tech, in workforce expectations, in rise in gig workers, boomer versus millennial versus Gen Z workers? How does an organization stay fluid enough that they don't lose the crowd?
Apparently Atlanta Braves thinks it means turning on loud music and dancing on the field between every inning.
It
Say
worked for
that
Savannah Bananas, just saying.
I say it tongue in cheek, but I think it's evolving with your audience, right? It is still a game. It's still entertainment. It's still about having fun. It's still about engaging your audience or your customer, right? And making sure that you're fully, you know what they want. You have to stay on top of what is it that your customer wants? What is it that your team wants, right? And helping them to recognize that and helping deliver that. You've got to be able to stay on top of the trend. If you don't, you're in trouble, right? I mean, you're just going to fail. I mean, if you want to go through some great examples of that, let's talk about my retail world and experience, right? I think a third of the retailers I've worked with in the last 20 years are gone because they didn't have the ability to flex and stay on top of what's going on. They didn't recognize and know their customer base the way they thought. I mean, look at Kmart and Sears, right? You want to talk about losing connectivity to, probably two of the biggest loyal brands if you go back 30, 40 years ago that are gone and didn't know what they had, didn't recognize it, and just killed themselves. And I see that happen in baseball too.
Well, I mean, and I think that's an incredibly valid point. It kind of ties in with what my thought is it comes down to leadership and having just really incredible prescience about the industry you're in, what the clients want, as Vince said. And then the second part of that is making sure that you deploy it and go after it, because if you delay, you could potentially hurt yourself significantly by just delaying. Now, I'm not even talking about arguing with it, trying to circumvent it. Fighting the inevitable is tantamount to falling behind, and then you'll have to catch up anyway. A great example in baseball is, I just saw this the other day, was Scherzer. He still gets all torqued up about the pitch clock. And I think it negatively impacts his performance. I really do. And then he's not the only one. There's other pitchers as well. It's here. It's here. Okay, you're not going to argue with it. The umpires revolting because they can see the automation coming to the balls and strikes. It's coming. It's going to happen once they figure out the micromillimeter off the plate issue that they've got. And it almost seems like they're fighting it. Well, it's their jobs. You can understand it, I guess. You got to get on board, and you have to make sure you're, if not ahead of the curve, you're not too far behind the curve. Everything. The only thing constant is change, right?
I hate to sound like a broken record here. I'll try to change it up just a little bit. In workforce management, conformity is a killer. You do not need 15 people on your team that all do the exact same thing, work the exact same way, process the exact same thing. Conformity is the killer of workforce management. So if you're, and I've been blessed with some of the greatest leaders known to man in my life. So I thank you who are on this call, who have been my past leaders, and those people who may be listening to this, thank you for knowing me, for leaning into my strengths, leaning into the value that I can bring to an organization. I think if you're a leader out there looking at how to build your team, focus on the individual, focus on what that individual can do. And listen, if you're just a young professional starting out there, or a middle-aged professional looking at what your next gig is going to be, don't be afraid to say what you want to do, what you love. Have that conversation. You pack your own chute. You're the one who's jumping out of this airplane. You're the one who is going to be doing the work. Do what you love every single day. Talk to your manager about putting yourself in that situation. I guarantee if you have those conversations as a manager and you have those conversations as an employee, you force those conversations, you're going to be on a winning team. You're going to hit home runs on a regular basis. You're going to be the best fielder in the outfield. You're going to steal bases. You are going to make an impact with your team. Focus on what you do best.
I love that. On kind of that leadership topic, one of my very favorite baseball isms, but really just kind of quotes in general that I think applies to both baseball and life, is surround yourself with people who will charge the mound. So surround yourself with those people who have got your back, who will advocate for you, who will speak your name in rooms that you're not in. I'm on this podcast episode with people who would charge the mound for me and with me if necessary. And I feel like that's been a secret to my success. Kind of just a round robin to close us all out. And Eric, I'll pick on you just because, I'm looking at your great Guardians hat. Everyone's going to be listening to this, but I'm staring these guys in the face. If you could pick one baseball principle that every, not just workforce management leader, but I think kind of leader in general should live by, what would it be to close us out?
Well, I'm gonna merge two if I could. It'll be one. Okay, so get them on, move them over, get them in, because it gets late early out there.
I love it. I actually should have ended with you if I knew we were going there. Vince, what do you got? Anything top of mind for you?
Oh man, to me, it always comes back to authenticity of the player. I love the people who love the game, right? I mean, there's some people out there that they do really well and they do it for the money and they do it, they somewhere along the line they lost track because they had to love the game to get where they are. But I love the players who finish out with just that passion and love for the game and inside and out. It goes back to, I can't remember who said it earlier, right? I mean, be in a position and in a job in a place that you love to be. And I think that carries through no matter what you're doing in life. Make sure you're doing something that you're passionate about and that you can enjoy, and you're doing it with people that you enjoy doing it with.
All right, Cutler, take us home.
Can I do two as well?
Yeah, we'll allow it.
In the words of my favorite baseball player of all time, Big Poppy, I just swing hard in case I hit it. That's it. So go out there and swing hard. And obviously the greatest baseball player of all time, Babe Ruth, never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. That's valid not only in the sport of baseball, but also in workforce management. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to make some mistakes. Go out there and learn from them and put together a winning team. That's the key, right? Vince said it. At the end of the day, there's one stat that matters: wins. You're going to have losses. You're going to have some losses on that, on that ticker. Go out there and win.
Man, I don't know how I made it this whole episode without mentioning Poppy. So thank you actually for ending on that. So you picked up the slack for me there. Again, I cannot thank you guys. This has been so fun. I've so been looking forward to this conversation. I thank you to UKG for lending us Corey, being willing to let him be on this podcast. Eric, Vince, as always, thanks for joining. All those listening, so glad that you continue to tune in on the Workforce on Deck podcast. So for anybody who wondered why it was Workforce on Deck, this is why. At our core, Vince and I are just big nerds about baseball, and to finally get the opportunity to really draw that line has been really fun for us. So thrilled we got a chance to do this today. Close us out. Take us home, big dog.
Yeah. Oh man, thanks for joining again. Make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you follow, make sure you like our podcast. So if you have ideas, send them to us. And thanks everyone for listening. Till next time.